Hello friends, today we are going to talk about something that was left out of the picture. Prisoner of War March in Moscow. On July 17, 1944, the remnants of the defeated German divisions in Belarus marched through the streets of Moscow. This event was supposed to instill confidence in Soviet citizens that the enemy had already been broken and overall victory was just around the corner. It was thought to be the end. Surprisingly enough, the idea of a POW parade through the streets of the Soviet capital was suggested by German propaganda. In one of the captured newsreels, the voice-over narration said that the brave soldiers of the German army had already marched victoriously through the streets of many European capitals, and now Moscow was next in line. The Soviet leadership decided not to deprive them of this opportunity, but they had to march not as winners, but as losers. The march of the German POWs promised to be a powerful propaganda move. Eyewitnesses to those events agree that the appearance of Germans in the streets of Moscow had the effect of an exploding bomb. Although the impending march was twice announced by radio at 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., and also reported on the front page of the Pravda newspaper, some Muscovites were at first puzzled and even panicked by the abundance of Germans in the capital. A total of 57,600 German prisoners of war took part in the Parade of the Vanquished, mostly from among those who had survived the extensive Bagration operation of the Red Army to liberate Belarus. Only those soldiers and officers of the Wehrmacht who were physically able to withstand the long march were sent to Moscow. Among them were 23 generals. In the organization of the German March were involved representatives of different branches of the armed forces. So, the protection of prisoners of war at the Hippodrome and Kodinka field were provided by structures of NKVD. The direct convoy was provided by the servicemen of Moscow Military District under the command of Colonel General Pavel Artemyev. Some of them moved on horseback with naked sabers, others were on foot with rifles at full stretch. Researchers with access to archives say that the Germans were prepared for the parade all night in one of Moscow's suburbs. The POWs seemed to have no idea what the whole affair was about. One of the marchers, Wehrmacht Private Helmut K., wrote on his return to Germany, "We thought we were being prepared for a show execution. The procession of the defeated started from the Hippodrome at 11 o'clock in the morning. First they moved along the Leningrad Highway, today a section of the Leningrad Avenue, then along Gorky Street. Then the prisoners were divided into two columns. The first, consisting of 42,000 people on Mayakovsky Square, turned clockwise to the Garden Ring. The final goal of the march was the Kursk station. The road took 2 hours and 25 minutes. The second column, which included another 15,600 prisoners of war, from Mayakovsky Square turned counterclockwise to the Garden Ring. The Germans passed through Smolenskaya, Krimskaya and Kaluzhskaya squares, and then turned onto Bolshaya Kaluzhskaya Street, Leninsky Prospect. The final point of the route was Konachikovo station of the District Railway, now the metro station area of Leninsky Prospect. The whole trip took 4 hours and 20 minutes. The passage of prisoners of war through the streets of Moscow, as eyewitnesses noted, was without serious excesses. Beria wrote in his report to Stalin that Muscovites behaved in an organized manner. Sometimes anti-fascist slogans were heard, "Death to Hitler," or "Bastards, let you die." But more often cheers were heard for the party and the Red Army. Significantly, the march was attended by many foreign correspondents. The country's leadership notified them of the upcoming event before the Muscovites themselves. Also, 13 cameramen were involved in filming the event. Stalin ensured that information about the march of the defeated enemies would be reported to the widest circles of the world community. He no longer doubted the final victory. The symbolic act was the passage through the streets of the capital of the special irrigation equipment, after the German columns passed through them. As the famous novelist Boris Polovoy recorded, the machines washed and cleaned Moscow's asphalt, destroying, it seems, and the very spirit of the recent German march. So that not a trace of Hitler's filth was left, so it was said in a newsreel devoted to the march of the German prisoners of war. Probably it was said not only in figurative sense. The thing is that the NKVD on pain of being shot forbade the prisoners to leave the columns, so they had to go and relieve themselves on the move. As witnesses testify, Moscow streets had, to put it mildly, an unsightly appearance after the passage of prisoners of war. Perhaps it was the consequence of intensive feeding of the Germans on the eve of the march. They were provided with an increased portion of porridge, bread and bacon, after which their digestive tract became weak. It is not without reason that another name for the POW March stuck in the masses, Diarrhea March. A user nicknamed Redkikater on one of the forums described how his great-grandmother encountered a German prisoner who miraculously escaped the guards and ran into Bolshoi Karetny Alley, where he desperately tried to get food. However, he was quickly discovered and escorted out to the others. And on the whole, there were no serious casualties. Only 4 German servicemen sought medical assistance after the end of the march. The others were distributed to stations, loaded into wagons and sent to special camps to serve their sentences. Writer Vsevolod Vishnevsky, who was present at the POW March, said that there was no visible aggression on the part of the onlookers, except that some young boys tried to throw stones at the column, but the guards drove them away. Every once in a while a spit and a foul language flew toward the defeated opponent. Considering the photographs of this event, now widely available on the net, one can see in general a restrained reaction of Muscovites to the enemy marching on the streets. Some of them look angrily, others show their faces, but more often it is the quiet, concentrated, slightly disdainful look of the people standing on both sides of the street that strikes the eye. Vladimir Pakomov, an honorary cultural worker of the Russian Federation who was 8 years old at the time, remembers well that the prisoners tried not to look around. Only some of them, he said, cast indifferent glances at the Muscovites. The officers tried to show with all their appearance that they were not broken. On Mayakovsky Square, one of the German officers, having seen in a crowd of the Soviet military with the gold star of the hero of the USSR, showed his fist in his direction. It turned out to be a scout and a future writer, Vladimir Karpov. In response, the senior lieutenant with his hands drew on his neck a semblance of a gallows. "Look what awaits you," he tried to tell the German. But he kept holding his fist. Karpov later confessed that at the time the thought flashed through his mind, "What a bastard. It's a pity they didn't kill you at the front." The artist Alla Andreeva did not want to see the German prisoners of war. She was put off by the medieval nature of the idea. But from the stories of her acquaintances who had been on the march, she remembered 2 things. The gaze of the Germans on the children, held by their mothers, and the wailing of the women, who wailed, "They are leading ours somewhere, too." These stories are imprinted in the artist's memory, with the humanity bursting through them. The French playwright Jean-Richard Bloch also left us his description of the events, whom the Muscovites struck by their dignified behavior. The earthy, gray-black stream of prisoners flowed between the 2 human shores, and the whispering of voices, merging together, rustled like a summer breeze, Bloch recorded. The Frenchman was especially surprised by the reaction of Muscovites to the washing of the streets with disinfectant. Here the Russian people burst out laughing. And when a giant laughs, it means something. Many witnesses noticed the sound of empty tin cans clinking in the deadly silence. Some thought they were deliberately made to be tied to the prisoners' belts to make them look like buffoons. But the truth is far more prosaic. The Germans simply used the iron cans as personal utensils. A user nicknamed Chess, who left a comment under a photo of a German POW March, described other sounds that struck his father at the time. He distinctly remembered the silence, broken only by the shuffling of thousands of soles against the pavement, and the heavy smell of sweat that floated over the columns of POWs.